Good evening. Forgot to get my mic beforehand. Here we go. All right. We're studying the book of Proverbs. Thank you, Junior. And we're looking at this, as I've mentioned several times, looking at it topically, and basically 5 major sections. We're in the first of these that, as I have mentioned before as well, it is the longest section with the most actual verses from Proverbs. Definitely the most subsections as well. But it is what makes up more of Proverbs than any of the other topics or sections, and that is a person and how he or she, he himself, she herself, relates to God and wisdom. It talks a lot about the blessings of wisdom. Sometimes you have wisdom that is personified as if a person speaking to us, encouraging us in the way that is right and the way that is best. It's all about having the best life. I mentioned before, can't remember the guy's name that wrote it. I think it was just an electronic book, just published electronically. But one of the books that I had seen and looked at some, especially putting together introductory material, was called "Don't Be Dumb," and that's a good summation of the book of Proverbs. Here's a father to his son, a man. Just generally, it's really God to mankind saying, you don't have to live a dumb life, a life full of foolish mistakes. Listen, learn. And so there's a lot of truth in that way of putting it. Don't be dumb. But also how to have the best life. That's the idea. So we talked, just to remind you of, I always forget that slide is there. I like that slide and I always forget to go to it while I'm making my introductory remarks. Here's just to remind you of section 1, how we've subdivided it. We've looked at wisdom and knowledge in general, and you may recall that was a lengthy section because some verses they just didn't seem to fit in any other category necessarily, or at least subcategory, so they kind of went into that just general wisdom, knowledge section. There's also, we've looked at the fear of the Lord, just kind of that expression or something very similar. That word abomination used several times in the book. We've looked at this concept of trust in God, gratitude, discretion. Last week, I'm sorry, it was actually before we took our summer break for the summer series, we talked about, looked at this theme, sub-theme of fools and foolishness. Then last week we talked about pride. We looked at temperance, and self-control, and kind of in with temperance, because I mentioned it last week, a lot of times we talk about abstaining from alcohol as temperance, because that idea of self-control. So I kind of originally had that as a whole separate subcategory. It really doesn't matter whether you want to consider it as a separate subcategory or part of the self-control, but nevertheless, I was hoping to get through that section last week. We ran out of time, but what is there, 11, 12, 13 verses is all that is in this subsection, and yet it's quite a bit of instruction that the Bible gives us relative to abstaining, staying away from alcohol. 20, verse 1. I'll tell you like I did last week. Whenever I give the first reference, I'll give you time to get there, and then we move forward from that, at least till we get to the next subsection. Am I crazy or am I hearing beeping?
Yeah, I'm hearing. It's the battery backup. It's going bad.
It's the battery backup. Okay.
You can turn it off if you lose everything.
I got you. I didn't know what it was. And so I was like, I think I'm hearing it. And I saw somebody look around and I was like, I don't think I am crazy. I think somebody else is hearing it. So there we go. The elephant in the room has been acknowledged. Rachel's threatening Brian, but he tells me if it'll shut down everything if we, but okay. That just, sometimes, you're like, am I crazy? All right, so.
Are you being crazy and the noise mutually exclusive? Or?
I'm not going to repeat that comment for those at home. All right, so chapter 20, verse 1. Chapter 20, verse 1 says, wine is a mocker, strong drink is raging. Whosoever is deceived thereby is not wise. It's a pretty, it is what it is. You don't need a lot of explanation for that. It just needs, it's one of those that, as a brother said one time of another verse, it needs a lot less explanation and a lot more obeying. Wine's a mocker, strong drink's raging. If you're deceived by that, that's not wise. All right, Proverbs 21:17. And I believe we looked at this one. Yes, we did, under temperance as well, and we talked about it. He that loveth pleasure shall be a poor man. He that loveth wine and oil shall not be rich. And we talked about it there I think we talked about it from the standpoint of the wine and oil as well. But, if all you ever want to do is have fun, all work or all play, no work, you're going to be a poor man. But at the same time, you don't want to be all work and no play either. And so and that's when we talk about self-control, balance, finding balance in our lives. But likewise, he that loveth wine and oil shall not be rich. There are things, even things that are not wrong in and of themselves, habits, desires that will eat your pocketbook up very quickly. And there's probably more than a few, even in this room, especially probably I would dare say a lot of men, maybe some of the women as well, that would have to say, when I got married, I realized I had to change some of my recreational hobbies because they were just so expensive, and it became hard to, balance the time, but also the financial commitment, and still be able to provide a living and provide for a family. So, great principle there. You love pleasure, you'll be a poor man. You love wine and oil. And even to the point of extravagant tastes. We could even look at it from that standpoint. But particularly here under this section, the alcohol, that's something that'll empty your pocketbook very quickly. And then go to chapter 23. Chapter 23, verses 29 through 35. You know the verses. We've seen these before, no doubt. Who hath woe? Who hath sorrow? Who hath contentions? Who hath babbling? Who hath wounds without cause? Who hath redness of eyes? They that tarry long at the wine, they that go to seek mixed wine. Look not thou upon the wine when it is red, when it giveth his color in the cup, when it moveth itself aright. At the last it biteth like a serpent, and stingeth like an adder. Thine eyes shall behold strange women. Thine heart shall utter perverse things. Yea, thou shalt be as he that lieth down in the midst of the sea, or as he that lieth upon the top of a mast. They have stricken me, shalt thou say, and I was not sick. They have beaten me, and I felt it not. When shall I awake? I will seek it yet again. How very true these words are. You know it, I'm sure, from observation. Some folks have dealt with that as well in their own lives. But he talks about, at the last it bites like a serpent, it stings like an adder. It's going to, we sometimes even say of something, it's going to get you It's ultimately going to get you. It's going to. We sometimes use that expression, something's going to come back to bite you. And that's kind of that idea. That's sort of the idea here. There may be a fleeting moment, and you've heard others no doubt talk about the commercials, and they show up, and the people are having such a good time, and they show you one side of that very intentionally because they're trying to make money. But he talks about somebody with woe, sorrow, contentions. A lot of times people start getting a little liquor in them, and next thing you know, they just want to fight everybody. And some people are, I grew up with at least a couple of different relatives that had a drinking problem. I don't know if I would say they were, full-blown alcoholics, but they definitely had a drinking problem. And it's very interesting sometimes how you could have one person gets a few drinks in them, and all they want to do is just weep, and everything is just sadness and depressive. But then there'll be another one that they get a few drinks in them, and it's the old expression, 10 feet tall and bulletproof, and they want to take on the world. And you look at them wrong, and they want a piece of you. Contentions, that's that idea. And babbling, well, if you've ever been around somebody that's gotten liquored up, a lot of times the speech slurs, and even if it's not slurred, a lot of times because they're impaired, they talk nonsense. Wounds without cause. Well, I could tell you from observing family members to even some folks I knew in school. Sometimes come, and I remember there was a particular group in high school of some of these guys that would go out on the weekends, and I don't know what the home situation was like, but even as a dumb, ignorant, immature, and probably even naive to an extent as well, child, I would sit there and think, where are your parents when you're doing all this stuff? But they would sometimes come back, and one day, a guy comes in, it was a cast or a brace or something, and somebody's asking him, what happened? He says, well, I'm not really sure. We were out drinking Friday night, Saturday night. I was at a party. I don't remember everything that happened. Wounds without cause. It just, and I've known folks talk about wake up in the morning and go, well, where did that come from? It might be a huge bruise. It might be a cut. It's pitiable if it weren't so preventable. Redness of eyes. And then when you get to the latter part of this section, it says, your eyes will behold strange women. You may be a fellow, you say, you know what, I'm a one-woman man. I'm going to be true to my woman. Especially, here's a married man who says, I'd never even think about cheating on my wife. You get him liquored up. You see if his eyes don't start to behold strange women. You remember we've talked before, that term used in the King James, meaning foreign, unauthorized. Your heart will utter perverse things. Many times you heard of somebody, they said or even did, or both, something when they were drunk. It doesn't even happen. Sometimes it may not even be to the point of just being sloppy drunk, but they say something, do something, or both, and later, they're sorry, they're apologizing. I don't know what got into me. Well, I know what got into you. Alcohol. That's what got into you. Your heart will utter perverse things. You'll be like one trying to lay down in the middle of the sea. You ever try to lay down in the midst of the sea? I don't recommend it, unless it's the Dead Sea. That's a tough crowd. Do what? Yeah. Yes, sir.
We're all
Yeah, it is. I can't tell you how many law enforcement folks I have known. Even, man, I was trying to remember what it was I read years ago. I want to say it was from somebody like, it might have been something Herbert Hoover had written. He the one that was head of the FBI at one time? Is that who I'm thinking of? Who was Herbert Hoover? Oh, as president. Okay, thank you, John. I got my Hoovers mixed up. J. Edgar Hoover. Thank you. Got the wrong Hoover there. But yeah, I think it might have been something he had written. But he made that exact statement. The biggest, most problematic drug problem in our country is not, some of these other recreational drugs that we talk about. Not to say that they're not a problem, but it's ethyl alcohol. And I've known so many law enforcement folks talking to them. It might be conversation. It might be they're speaking to Brother John Cupp in Chattanooga West. I think we've talked about John before. Did you know John? Okay, so you know John. He was Hamilton County Sheriff for years and years, and a lot of times he'd come and talk to our preachers' luncheon and things like that. And he also spoke at a lot of youth events, even as he got older, he was in a lot of demand for youth events just because of his experience and background there, but also just preaching to adults as well. And man, that was something that he'd tell you in a heartbeat. That's, and most law enforcement I've talked to, they say that is the drug that gets more folks than anything else. People just do foolish, dumb stuff, like one trying to lie down in the middle of the sea.
Dr. Baltimore expressed very clearly in Proverbs chapter 31, not the king's women which drink wine, drinks the strong drink, which they drink for virtue.
And that's where we're going next. You're a step ahead of me. Yes, sir.
It's amazing to me in Galatians chapter 5, verse 19 through 21. There are 17 sins that's explicitly listed that will keep you out of heaven. The sin right before drunkenness is murder. Now, is that coincidental, or does that show you the seriousness of it in God's eyes?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's right there with some whoppers, as we would call them, and understanding sin is sin, but we also understand there is a difference in the sense of consequences and things like that. But yeah, murder and then drunkenness, right there in Galatians 5, 19 through 21. So yeah, certainly. It mentions one trying to lie down in the middle of the sea. He that lieth upon the top of a mast. You ever tried to do that? They have stricken me, shalt thou say, and I was not sick. They've beaten me, and I felt it not. That's the 10 feet tall and bulletproof person. You can just, and it's amazing sometimes. In fact, how often is it when a drunk driver gets involved in an accident? And I mean, vehicles may be mangled. How often is it? They almost walk away, if not literally able to walk away. And many times left behind to live with the guilt of that. I don't know if any of y'all ever saw back in, this would have been 07, 08, when Barry Gilreath Jr. sat down with a member of the Highland congregation at that time. He had been restored. He had been in prison. He served his time. He was paroled, and he was restored, I think, while he was still in prison. But when he got out, he came back to his home area, and we was attending there at Highland. But he was in prison because he was an unfaithful Christian, drinking, got behind the wheel, and was involved in an accident, and he killed. I can't remember if it was the whole family that was in the other vehicle. And I mean, you talk about gut-wrenching to see that interview. Did anybody ever see that? I don't know if they still have that somewhere in their archives or not. I'd like to get my hands on it and see, because I remember, in fact, I think I was there in the studio when they recorded it. But there were numerous times that brother just broke down. And he talked about that. He talked about, I have to live with that the rest of my life. He said, I'm thankful to be out and able to be assembling with the church and things like that. But at the same time, there's not a day that I don't wake up feeling guilty for being alive, let alone being able to just walk around, relatively speaking, free. He was on parole and had certain restrictions, of course, but he said it's something that I will never not carry with me. You remember that, Leroy? That interview? That was powerful. It may still be in there. It was on. It was like a GBN special, right? I believe it was a GBN special presentation, and I believe Leroy, you may have been there that night when we filmed that as well. It had to be done in an evening because I think because of his work schedule, the other guy. So anyway, it's something. If you ever get a chance to watch it, I would recommend it just because it is so powerful, coming from somebody who, speaking from experience. And then that last couple of phrases, I mean, it's just so true. When shall I awake? I will seek it yet again. That speaks to the addictive nature of it, but also just the utter foolishness that you see sometimes with people that get involved in that. I mean, how many times have you seen some of those same people, that group in high school, you talk about, and again, I'll tell you, 14, 15, 16-year-old Chad was one of the dumbest creatures you would know, and one of the most immature, at times, creatures you ever would have met. But I would sometimes just sit, and I'm just kind of listening. And they're talking about, and then this happened, and one guy's got, scratches all over him. One of them's got a black eye. One of them's got this, like I said, I don't remember if it was a cast or a brace, whatever. And I mean, like all this because, somebody looked at me. And they get into this big brawl with somebody from, some guys who are also out there drinking like fools. And they talk about all this, and sometimes almost like in the next breath. So what are we doing this weekend? Where are we going to go? You getting the beer this weekend? Who's getting it? And I mean, like, here's even my immature, dumb self, and I'm just thinking, you guys are idiots. I mean, like, that is so foolish. But that's what happens. You start messing around with stuff, and it'll get a hold of you. And then Brother Mark mentioned Proverbs 31. Let's go there. Proverbs 31, 4 through 7. Lemuel's mother speaking to him here. It is not for kings, O Lemuel. It is not for kings to drink wine, nor for princes strong drink, lest they drink and forget the law, and pervert the judgment of any of the afflicted. Give strong drink unto him that is ready to perish, and wine unto those that be of heavy hearts. Let him drink and forget his poverty, and remember his misery no more. I had somebody tell me one time, I was in a discussion, I think it was a member of church. I want to say, I can't remember for sure, but I want to say it was a sister I was talking to. We kind of emailed back and forth some because she took issue with a teetotaler stance that I was taking from the book of Proverbs. And so we kind of started exchanging emails about that and talking about it. And this is one of the verses she went to. She was a drinker, of course. And it's very rare that I've run across somebody that wants to defend drinking who's not. But she said, look, right here in Proverbs 31, give strong drink to him that's ready to perish, wine to those that are of heavy hearts. See, the Bible's encouraging it. If you're sad, if you got a heavy heart, drink and forget his poverty. See, Chad? Remember his misery no more. Well, you know what I quite often say, context matters. Look at your context. This is not Lemuel telling his mom, hey, look, if you're depressed, go get you some alcohol. Make yourself feel better. She says, this is not for kings or princes to drink that stuff. Let the fool who wants nothing to do with God or sense My mom used to say, talk about somebody, she might have said it to me once, twice, who acts like they don't have enough sense to come in out of the rain. She said, let the fool, the unrighteous, the ungodly, the one that doesn't have enough sense to come in out of the rain, let that person have the alcohol. You stay away from that stuff because you don't want to get deceived. You don't want to get impaired by that and end up, as it says there, verse 5, and forget the law and pervert judgment. And, of course, inevitably somebody, back to Tim's point from Galatians 5, somebody talk about, well, it's drunkenness that it's talking about. And yet, when you take one drink, what are you but one drink into the process? You're one drink drunk. Oh, and I heard somebody, it wasn't even that long ago, that really mocked that one drink drunk. That's ridiculous. Why don't you ask a doctor? I mean, don't take my word for it. I'm not a doctor. But doctors who have done the studies will tell you the first drink begins to impair your judgment. And Scripture, we've looked at before in sermons on alcohol. Scripture does refer to it. Chris mentioned this just a second ago. It's a process. And it's the idea of don't even begin that process. But medical professionals will tell you. In fact, I think, Wes, you'd have been living, you might have still been a pretty young person in school, but you may remember in Chattanooga several years ago, I remember because Jim Dearman and I talked about this, Leroy, you may recall, there were several billboards put up all around Chattanooga and the surrounding area, and they would say, buzzed driving, do you remember the rest, Wes? What was it? Is drunk driving. Somebody over here said it, Melissa. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. And it's because they understand. You get even one drink and you're into that process. You're that far drunk. And so why? And that's what I keep coming back to with people. I said, you know what? Even if we didn't have all these verses in Scripture, and we do, lots of verses that teach very clearly about it, even if we didn't have that, you would have to be so foolish to see the effects of that stuff all around us. And I dare say there's probably not a family, an individual sitting here in this auditorium right now that has not in some way been affected by it, and not in a positive way. I don't think I've ever known anybody that said, you know what really made my life better? Alcohol. I mean, there's a lot of decisions I regret in life, but man, drinking alcohol is not one of them. You might find some person that's a fool and ungodly, unrighteous person, but it's not doing anything good for an individual or for society. Tim, you were going to say something.
For several years now, the police has had the body cam. And whenever they do these pullovers, it's amazing how many people are pulled over for being suspected of drunk driving. And they get out, and the officers interacting with them, and they're trying to convince the officer, I'm fine, officer. So, are we going to leave it up to the person drinking, as alcohol impairs the thought process, to determine if they think they're drunk? I've been around people that's been drinking in my younger days, and it's amazing how many people couldn't even stand up, making the
And they'll tell you, I'm fine.
I'm
Yeah.
fine. Why are you stumbling all over yourself?
I'm telling you, I had a cousin that same way. I mean, he would just be stumbling around. I'm fine. I could get in that car right now and drive home, and I'd be fine. Yes, sir.
To the Christian, one of the biggest responsibilities we have is our influence. And could you imagine if I went into a package store and I came out with a six-pack of beer, and I talked to an individual on the street and said, I want to talk to you about Jesus. They'd blow you off. They'd say, you're crazy. Look what's under your arm. But a lot of these kids are being influenced by the very ones that are supposed to be protecting
Absolutely. And Tim made me think of something, mentioning that. Even if I were to take the position, okay, drunkenness is condemned, but not, if you're just, as long as you don't get to the point of you're drunk. Well, again, as Tim pointed out, I've never met anybody with any amount of alcohol in them say, oh yeah, I'm just sloppy drunk. But that's a matter of degrees. How drunk is too drunk? At what point of drunkenness do you cross over? Oh, you've sinned. Now you're guilty of drunkenness. And when you follow that to the logical conclusion, the only way I know that, because it is different for different people, and doctors and folks will tell you that, a lot of it is body weight and things like that. But to find out my point, what do I have to do? Well, I would have to get drunk at some point, and thus I've sinned. So I'd have to sin to find out my point to avoid sinning. Do you see that just gets absurd, and it becomes obvious that's just not going to get it. So the Bible's very clear on that, and Robert also made me think of there's several verses in the New Testament talk about and admonish Christians, be sober, and it's a word. The Greek word, it means free from intoxicants, free from impairment, and that's the idea, to be sober-minded. So, yeah, there's a lot more we can say from Scripture about it. We're just kind of limiting most of our material here to Proverbs, but good thoughts there. Anything else on that before we go to leadership? Yes, sir. Go ahead, Mark. Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because I meant to bring that out, because he says his mother's telling him not for kings, not for princes. Well, if you and I are Christians, we're children of the King of Kings. So I don't need to be messing with that stuff. Bob, you were going to mention something.
There's a positive side to this. In Galatians 5 and 16, we're admonished to walk by the Spirit, you shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. Then he goes on to say they're conflicted with each other. Mm-hmm. If we're a Christian and we have God's Spirit in our life, we have help. We have help. That's why the world does not understand. Why are you guys, talking about teetotaling and not doing this and not doing that? I mean, that's just so stupid where I am right here in the world. Yeah, you understand that because, hey, we were in the world too. But God's ideal is coming through the book of Proverbs, and he wants us, and he can help us. That's the whole point. He can help us through addictions, through this and that, to be the type of holy person that we know in the back of our conscience somewhere we really do want to be.
And that goes back to I know it's been way back at the beginning of our class, we talked about some of these frequent words that we see in Proverbs, or even, they may not even necessarily be that frequent, but particular words. Discretion was one of those. And that's seeing potential danger in a situation, in a circumstance, or it might even be in a substance like alcohol, and saying, I'm gonna avoid it, pass not by it, turn away. As the wise man says in Proverbs 4. I'm not going to go over here and see how close I can get to that. Well, I'll just drink a little bit. Boy, how many people said that and ended up with a problem? And, the infamous statement that so often gets said is, I could stop at any time. Yes, ma'am.
My dad used to give me this example. He's like, what
left. I was going to say, you don't live with Levi. No, to be fair, I've never seen Levi drink an entire six-pack of soda. I think he could, though.
You know, I was in a study today, and it was about God's instruction for the children of Israel in driving the inhabitants out of the land of Canaan. And it was very clear. Don't leave anybody behind. And yet, you go to Judges chapter 1, and what do they start doing? They start by driving them out. And then, right there in the middle, they start leaving people behind, allowing them to be taxable people. And you're like, okay, how do you miss that? God was so clear. But yet, Proverbs chapter 23, in regards to drinking, in verse 31, he says, don't look at it. And then he gives the explanation of when it swirls in the glass, when it lasts it back. Like, how do we struggle with we're going to take it, hold it, and then consume it? When he starts out, don't look at it.
Yeah. There's certain things that we say that, like, don't even look at it. And I mentioned before, it's not original with me. I think it came from, I think it's Every Man's Battle is the name of the book, where, I was trying to remember the authors, but anyway, the book's called Every Man's Battle. Stephen Artburn, and there's another guy, Stoker, I think. Fred Stoker, maybe. So anyway, the book it deals a lot with. It's a book, really a book that just about every young man ought to read. You have to spit out some briars here and there because it's not written by a New Testament Christian, but it's really good on purity and purity of mind, especially when it comes to pornography. But he uses the phrase, and as far as I know, I've never heard it, seen it anywhere else except either there or attributed to them. But they talk about bouncing your eyes. And Brother Billy Bland, in his inimitable way, used to say to us, talking about whether it be pornography or maybe you're out and here's a lady that's dressed very scantily clad or whatever, and he says, you know, I can't keep a bird from flying over my head, but I sure can make sure he's not going to stop and build a nest in my hair. And so their equivalent of that was bounce your eyes. He says, you know, yeah, sometimes you're out there, it might be a billboard, it might be a person, it might be on the television. He said, bounce your eyes. Look away. And that's what the wise man says there in Proverbs 23. When it comes to alcohol, he says, bounce your eyes. Don't even look at it, let alone touch it. Get away. There are certain things, and he uses the illustration of a snake. If you know there's a venomous snake there, I don't think I'm seeing how close I can get to him. I don't think I'm seeing if I can go here and pet him, or if maybe I could just, I'm just going to touch him. I don't want to like pick him up. I just want to touch him and, just stay away from it. Some things you just need to stay away from.
Chad, it's a lot to do with greed. Somebody's making a whole lot of money.
Oh yeah, and and again, that's back to the commercials. It's always made to look so appealing, and especially to our young folks, a lot of times that idea of belonging, you're in that group of buddies, you're in that group, you're having such a good time, and there's a lot of peer pressure comes into play, but yes, so much is driven by greed, where the world just wants to push that on us, and people don't. There's always a certain incompatibility of light and darkness, and so people don't want to be doing something by themselves. So if they're drinking, they're going to try to get you to drink, and if you don't, then that's where that incompatibility comes in many times, and it may be starting to make fun, it may be sort of ostracizing you, but a lot of times I think, I can't say every time, but I think quite often it comes down to people that they know they're not choosing a wise path. And it's a lot easier if everybody just jumps in and it kind of feels like everybody's doing it. But here's that one person that's the voice of reason. But I don't want that voice of reason when I want to do what I want to do. So a lot of times it's like, you just get on out of here. We don't want you around. And sometimes that happens, and that's hard a lot of times, especially for our young folks to deal with. But let's be real. That's a lot of times hard for adults to deal with too. Alan Hires just passed away very recently, and I remember it's one of the it was one of the PTP lessons he taught. I don't remember what it was. I think through the end of September, PTP has made all of the lessons he's ever done at PTP available for free download. If you go to I don't know, I'd have to find it, but if you want to. It's on the PTP Facebook page. You can see it there. But he tells a story about a guy that was constantly, whenever there'd be lawyer gatherings, he was a judge. He started off as a lawyer, eventually ended up as a judge. And this one fellow would constantly, take a drink, and he never would. The guy would make fun of him relentlessly. And then finally the day came when somebody else came, beat this guy to it. He offers Brother Hires a drink. He says no. That guy starts making fun of him. Then the guy that had made fun of him and given him such a hard time for years jumped in and defended Brother Hires. And he said it was blown away, but he said, you never know. The influence you might have, and how would that have destroyed my influence if I had compromised? And so, but yeah, nothing good coming from ethyl beverage alcohol for sure. So, appreciate that. A lot more that we could say about it, obviously, from the rest of Scripture, but even just the book of Proverbs has quite a bit to say. Thank y'all so much. A lot of good comments and input. We didn't even get started on leadership, but that's okay. We're at a good stopping point. We'll pick up, Lord willing, next Wednesday, and we will talk about leadership from the book of Proverbs. Thank y'all.